The dungeons of the capital were designed to break the spirit. They were deep, cold, and soundproofed. But tonight, the soundproofing wasn't enough. Elias sat on the stone floor of his high-security cell. He was back in chains, his wrists bound by heavy magnetic cuffs. But he wasn't defeated. He was listening. Through the thick blast doors, he could hear a rhythmic thrumming sound. It was a vibration that traveled through the rock. Thump, thump, thump. It was the prisoners in the lower blocks. They were banging their metal cups against the bars. They were chanting his name. "They are still cheering," Jax whispered from the cell next door. The boy sounded exhausted, but there was a new note in his voice. "Hope. They know you're here. The whole city knows," Kale growled from the opposite cell. "Xylar made a mistake. He let us live." Elias leaned his head back against the cold wall. He didn't have a choice. If he killed us in the arena, the mob would have torn him apart. He's waiting for the fervor to die down. Then he'll execute us quietly. "So we wait to die?" Grom asked, his heavy orc voice echoing in the corridor. "We wait for an opening," Elias said. Suddenly, the lights in the corridor flickered. The hum of the energy fields that acted as cell doors wavered. The heavy blast door at the end of the block hissed open. "Guard!" Kale roared, leaping to his feet. But it wasn't a guard. A figure draped in a heavy gray cloak slipped into the corridor. The figure moved quickly, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the security cameras. The figure stopped in front of Elias's cell. "Strength and honor," a female voice whispered. Elias stood up. "Valeriana." She pulled back her hood. Her face was pale, her violet eyes wide with urgency. She held a datapad in shaking hands. "We don't have much time," she said. "My brother has ordered a purge. At dawn, he is going to vent the atmosphere in the lower levels. He plans to kill every prisoner who heard the broadcast. He's going to massacre 50,000 people." Jax gasped. "He is scared," Valeriana said, her fingers flying across the datapad. "He knows his power is slipping. He thinks fear will restore order." She pressed a final key. Zap. The energy field blocking Elias's cell vanished. Valeriana stepped in. She reached out and touched the magnetic cuffs on his wrists. She entered a code. The cuffs clicked and fell to the floor with a heavy clang. Elias rubbed his wrists. He looked at her. "You just committed treason, Val. There is no going back from this." "I made my choice when I saw you spare the wolf," she said softly. "I choose the living." She handed him the datapad. "This is the master key for the slave control grid," she explained. "If you transmit this code, every neural collar in the city deactivates. Every shock cuff opens." Elias looked at the device. It was small, innocuous, but it was the key to an army. "If I push this," Elias said, looking at her seriously, "the city burns. The slaves will rise. There will be blood." "The city is already burning, Elias," she said, placing a hand on his cheek. "It is just burning slowly, on the backs of the poor. It is time for the fire to reach the spire." Elias covered her hand with his own. "Get to safety. If Xylar finds you." "I will be at the Senate," she said, stepping back. "I have to try to sway the High Council before the fleet launches." "Go. Lead them." She turned and ran back into the shadows. Elias stepped out into the corridor. He looked at the datapad. He looked at the lock on Kale's cell. He pressed the button. Click. Every lock in the corridor opened. Every collar fell off. Kale kicked his door open. He stepped out, rubbing his neck where the collar had chafed for years. He looked at Elias. He bared his fangs in a smile that was pure, predatory joy. "The leash is cut," Kale growled. "Free the others," Elias ordered, his voice hardening into command mode. "We have work to do." The sound of 1,000,000 collars hitting the floor was not loud. It was a soft clatter, like rain falling on dry leaves. But the roar that followed shook the foundations of the prison. Elias stood on a table in the central mess hall of Block 4. Thousands of prisoners, miners, gladiators, thieves, political dissidents were surging into the room. They were confused, angry, and terrified. "Silence," Elias bellowed. His voice, honed on the drill fields of earth, cut through the panic. "The collars are off," Elias shouted. "But the doors are still locked. The guards are coming. If you run, you die. If you riot without purpose, you die." He pointed to the massive blast doors at the far end of the hall. They were already beginning to heat up. Sparks showered down as the guards on the other side used plasma cutters to breach the room. "They are coming to kill us," a prisoner screamed. "Then we fight." Elias roared. "Kale, form the line." "Legion," Kale shouted. Front and center. The gladiators of the Iron Legion pushed through the crowd. They had no armor. They had no weapons. But they had discipline. "We need a shield wall," Elias ordered. "Tear the tables from the floor. Use the benches. Anything heavy." The mob moved. Spurred by the command, their panic turned into action. Massive steel tables were ripped from their bolts. They were flipped on their sides, creating a makeshift barricade facing the blast doors. "Jax, get the vents," Elias commanded. "Take the small ones. Get to the armory control room. Open the lockers." "I'm on it," Jax shouted, scrambling into an air duct. The blast doors blew inward with a deafening crump. Smoke filled the room. Through the haze, a squad of riot troopers charged in. They were heavily armored, wielding stun batons and sonic cannons. "Subdue! Subdue!" the lead trooper shouted, his voice amplified. They fired a sonic wave. The air rippled. The wave hit the table barricade with the force of a truck. Prisoners screamed, covering their ears, bleeding from the nose. "Hold!" Elias yelled, bracing his shoulder against a table. "Do not break." The troopers advanced, expecting the mob to scatter. They were used to fear. They were used to collars that shocked anyone who disobeyed. But the collars were gone. "Now," Elias shouted. "Push." The wall of steel tables surged forward. Behind it, 1,000 prisoners pushed. The sheer mass of bodies was unstoppable. The troopers were caught off guard. The table wall slammed into them, crushing them against the corridor walls. Their sonic cannons were useless at point-blank range. "Take their weapons." Kale roared, leaping over the barricade. He grabbed a trooper by the helmet and threw him into the mob. It was brutal. It was fast. The prisoners swarmed over the guards, stripping them of armor, rifles, and batons. Elias grabbed a shock rifle from the ground. He checked the charge. "Full. Arm yourselves." Elias ordered. "We move up, level by level. We don't stop until we see the sky." The prison of Ephelos was built like an inverted pyramid. To get to the surface, they had to climb 50 levels. They moved like a virus. Level 40, the processing center. They overran the clerks and smashed the server banks. Records of debts, crimes, and ownership were erased in a shower of sparks. Level 30, the drone maintenance bay. Nyx, the Solarian tech thief, jacked into the terminal. "I can't control them all," Nyx shouted over the sound of blaster fire. "But I can make them friendly." He slammed his fist on the enter key. The security drones that had been firing on the prisoners suddenly stopped. Their lights turned from angry red to passive blue. They spun around and began escorting the prisoners, firing stun bolts at the retreating guards. "Good enough," Elias laughed. Level 10, the surface gate. This was the bottleneck. A massive durasteel gate, 10 feet thick, blocked the exit to the city streets. "It's sealed," Grom shouted, banging his club against the metal. "We can't break it." "We don't need to break it," Elias said. He tapped his comms bead, a stolen guard unit. "Jax, are you there?" "I'm in the control tower, Elias." Jax's voice crackled, breathless. There are a lot of buttons." "Look for the emergency override," Elias said calmly. "Yellow panel. Big lever." "I see it. But it says ventilation purged." "Pull it." "But..." "Pull it, Jax." There was a hiss of hydraulics. The massive gate didn't open. Instead, the huge ventilation turbines set into the wall stopped. The air pressure in the tunnel equalized. The maintenance hatch. Elias pointed to a small, round door in the center of the main gate. With the pressure gone, the locks disengaged. Kale ripped the hatch open. Sunlight, real, unfiltered sunlight, spilled into the dark tunnel. Elias stepped through. He climbed out of the maintenance shaft and stood on the street. He was in the Shadow District, the sprawling slums that surrounded the Golden City. The air smelled of ozone and rain. Behind him, the army of the damned poured out of the earth. Thousands of them. They were dirty, bleeding, and armed with stolen weapons. But they were free. The citizens of the Shadow District stopped their work. Shopkeepers, beggars, mechanics, they all froze, staring at the Legion emerging from the ground. Elias walked to the center of the street. He raised his rifle. "People of Ethelos." Elias shouted, "The chains are broken. The spire has fallen." A silence hung over the street. Then a woman, a shopkeeper with worn hands, stepped forward. She looked at the broken collar on Elias's neck. She looked at his face, the face she had seen on the broadcast. "The saint," she whispered. She picked up a heavy wrench from her workbench. She held it up. "Strength," she said, her voice shaking. "And honor," the mob roared back. It was the spark. The fear evaporated. Men grabbed tools. Women grabbed knives. The Shadow District was joining the fight. "Commander," Kale shouted, pointing to the sky. "Look up." Elias looked up. Above the skyline of the slums, the massive, triangular shadows of the Imperial fleet were descending from the clouds. Bombardment cannons were glowing red. "They are going to level the district," Kale growled. Elias racked the slide of his rifle. "Then we bring them down," Elias said. "To the anti-air batteries. Move." The Shadow District was a canyon of durasteel and neon, built into the trenches that surrounded the golden pedestal of the capital. It was home to 20 million souls, the workers, the mechanics, the forgotten. Now it was a battlefield. Incoming. Elias screamed, diving behind a rusted dumpster. A Synod gunship roared overhead, its engines screaming like tearing metal. A line of plasma bolts chewed up the street, vaporizing a food stall and sending pedestrians scrambling for cover. "They are strafing the streets." Kale roared, shaking dust from his fur. "Cowards, come down here and fight." Elias looked around. The army of escaped prisoners was mixing with the locals. It was chaos. Civilians were running in panic. Prisoners were looting shops for weapons. "Listen to me," Elias shouted, grabbing a prisoner who was trying to smash a shop window. "Stop looting. We need barricades, not televisions." He climbed atop a pile of rubble. "If we stay in the open, we die," Elias bellowed, his voice amplified by the narrow streets. "The gunships will pick us off. We need to take the sky back." He pointed toward a massive, dark tower looming over the district. It was the Sector 7 anti-air battery, a fortress of black metal bristling with quad cannons. "That battery controls the airspace over this district," Elias shouted. "If we take it, the gunships can't fly." "Who is with me?" A roar went up from the crowd. Not just the prisoners, but the citizens. Mechanics brandishing heavy wrenches. Dockworkers holding laser cutters. "Legion," Elias commanded. "Spearhead formation. Grom, you're on point. Be the battering ram." With pleasure, the massive orc grunted, ripping a lamppost out of the concrete to use as a club. They charged. The street leading to the AA battery was defended by a squad of Rye troopers and 2 light scout walkers. "Open fire," the trooper captain ordered. Bolts of blue energy zipped through the air. "Shields," Elias yelled. There were no shields here, but the mob had improvised. Dockworkers moved forward carrying sheets of hull plating ripped from scrapyards. They formed a jagged, rusty wall. The plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against the thick ship armor. Push. The mob surged. The sheer weight of numbers overwhelmed the defensive line. Grom swung his lamppost, smashing the leg of a scout walker. The machine toppled, crashing into a storefront. Kale leaped onto the second walker. He ripped the cockpit hatch open with his bare claws and threw the pilot out. The tower. Elias pointed. The entrance to the AA battery was a heavy blast door. "Jax," Elias shouted. "Can you bypass?" Jax ran up, protected by Nix and Click. The boy looked at the keypad. It was military grade. I can't hotwire this," Jack stammered. "It's encrypted." "Stand aside," a deep voice rumbled. A local citizen, a massive, gray-skinned miner with cybernetic arms, stepped forward. He was holding a heavy-duty plasma cutter used for dismantling starships. "We built this tower," the miner grunted, revving the cutter. "We can unbuild it." He jammed the cutter into the hinges. Sparks showered the street. The metal glowed white, then molten red. With a groan of metal, the door fell inward. Up the stairs. Elias ordered, "Clear the roof." The fighting inside was close and brutal. Stairwell by stairwell, the rebellion fought their way up. Elias led from the front, his stolen shock rifle flashing. They burst onto the roof. The gun crews, realizing they were overrun, threw down their weapons and surrendered. Elias ran to the control console of the main quad cannon. Nix, get on the targeting computer. The Solarian tech thief slid into the chair. His fingers flew across the holographic interface. I'm in, Nix chirped. Targeting protocols unlocked. I see the gunships. Clear the sky, Elias ordered. The massive cannon swiveled. The gears groaned. THOM, THOM, THOM. Flak shells burst in the air above the district. The lead gunship, caught by surprise, took a direct hit to its engine turbine. It spun out of control, crashing into an empty warehouse district in a ball of fire. The other gunships, realizing the AA grid was active and hostile, peeled off and retreated toward the upper atmosphere. A cheer went up from the streets below, a sound so loud it drowned out the sirens. Elias stood on the roof, the wind whipping his hair. He looked down at the city. Fires were burning, but the people weren't running anymore. They were building barricades. They were organizing. We have the district, Elias said into the comms. Now we look up. High above the chaos, in the cold vacuum of orbit, the Imperial flagship Sovereign hung like a dagger aimed at the heart of the world. On the bridge, Admiral Karan stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man of the old school, stiff uniform, gray beard, and a belief in the code of the Admiralty. Report, Karan barked. Sir, the sensor officer replied, voice trembling. Sector 7 AA batteries have been compromised. We have lost 2 gunships. The Shadow District is in full revolt. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the bridge. It was High Archon Xylar. His face was twisted in a rictus of rage. Admiral, Xylar screamed. Why is that district still standing? I gave you an order. Burn it. Archon, Karan said slowly. The district is home to 20 million civilians. The targets are mixed with non-combatants. My scanners show thousands of women and children in the streets. They are traitors. Xylar hissed. Every one of them. They cheer for the gladiator. They defy me. Burn them all, Admiral. Glass the district, or I will find someone who will. The bridge went silent. Every officer looked at the Admiral. The order was clear. It was also genocide. Karan looked at the hologram. He looked at the red button on his console that would release the kinetic bombardment rods. Sir, the comms officer interrupted. We are receiving a transmission. Wideband. It's coming from the surface. Put it on, Karan ordered. The main screen shifted. It wasn't Elias. It was a view from a helmet cam. It showed a hospital in the Shadow District. Prisoners were carrying wounded civilians into the building. It showed Elias directing traffic, stopping looters, protecting the innocent. A voiceover, Nix's voice, cut in. This is not a riot. This is a rescue. The Archon abandoned you. The Iron Legion protects you. Soldiers of the fleet, who do you serve? The tyrant in the Spire, or the people in the streets? Xylar's face turned purple. Cut the feed. Jam it. I can't, sir, the comms officer said. It's bouncing off every satellite in the grid. The whole planet is watching. Admiral Karan looked at the screen. He saw a gladiator, a slave, acting with more honor than the High Council. He looked back at Xylar. Admiral. Xylar shouted. Fire the damn guns. Karan reached out. He opened the safety cover on the bombardment console. Then he closed it. Click. Belay that order, Karan said, his voice ringing across the bridge. What? Xylar whispered. We are the shield of Ephelos, Karan said, staring down the Archon. We protect the citizens. We do not slaughter them. This is mutiny, Xylar shrieked. I will have you executed. You'll have to come up here and do it yourself, Karan said. Comms. Open a channel to the fleet. Channel open, sir. All ships, Karan said into the microphone. This is Admiral Karan. Stand down. Cease all fire on surface targets. Maintain high orbit holding pattern. We are observers only. Out. One by one, the icons of the other destroyers on the tactical map turned from red, attack, to yellow, hold. The fleet was standing down. Xylar stared at the Admiral, his mouth working silently. He had lost the sky. You will regret this, Xylar whispered. I have other ways to burn the world. The hologram cut out. On the bridge of the Sovereign, the crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. Karan walked to the viewport and looked down at the planet. "Good luck, soldier," he whispered to the tiny speck of the shadow district below. "We gave you the sky. The ground is up to you." The Bridge of Tears was an architectural marvel and a tactical nightmare. It was a suspension bridge 2 miles long, constructed of white durasteel and suspension cables thick as redwood trees. It spanned the Great Rift, a bottomless chasm that separated the Shadow District from the high-altitude plateau of the inner city. It was the only way across, and the Empire knew it. Elias stood at the edge of the Shadow District, looking through a pair of digital binoculars. The wind coming off the rift was cold, whipping his cloak around his legs. "Report," Elias said. Kale crouched beside him, his fur bristling. 3 Colossus-class walkers, anchored at the midpoint of the bridge. They have overlapping fields of fire. Nothing gets past them. Elias adjusted the zoom. The walkers were massive, tripedal war machines standing 40 feet tall. Their main cannons glowed with the blue hum of charged plasma. Beneath them, a company of riot troopers had set up barricades. "It's a kill box," Grom grunted, resting his heavy club on his shoulder. "If we step on that bridge, they vaporize us." "We have the numbers," a rebel leader, the miner with the cybernetic arm, argued. "We rush them. They can't kill us all." "They can," Elias said sharply. "And they will. A frontal charge is suicide. We need to blind them." Elias turned to Nyx. "Can you hit their sensors?" The Solarian tapped nervously on his portable deck. "The walkers use a dedicated battle net. High-level encryption. I can't hack it from here. I need to be within 500 meters. 500 meters is right in their throat," Kale noted. "Then we get you close," Elias said. He looked at the piles of debris, old tires, and industrial waste littering the edge of the slums. "Burn it," Elias ordered. "What?" "Everything," Elias pointed. "Tires, oil, plastoid. Light it up." "The wind is blowing toward the bridge. We create a wall of smoke. Thermal optics can see through smoke, but if the fire is hot enough, the heat signature will clutter their scopes." The rebels moved. Within minutes, a mountain of trash was ablaze. Thick, black, oily smoke rolled out, carried by the updraft of the canyon. It swallowed the bridge in a choking darkness. "Into the smoke," Elias commanded. "Hand on the shoulder of the man in front of you. Don't stop. Don't speak." The army of the liberated marched into the black fog. Visibility dropped to 0. Elias walked to the front, his hand gripping Nyx's shoulder to guide the tech thief. The air tasted of burning rubber and chemical fire. Boom! The ground shook. The walkers were firing blindly into the smoke. A plasma bolt screamed overhead, exploding 100 yards behind them. Another struck the suspension cable to their left, sending a shower of molten metal raining down. "Steady," Elias whispered. "Keep moving." Boom! A scream from the ranks behind them. A lucky shot had hit the column. "Don't stop," Elias hissed. "If we stop, we bunch up. If we bunch up, we die." They marched over the bodies of the fallen. The vibration of the massive walkers grew louder. Thump, thump. They were close. "Nyx," Elias whispered. "Range." 600 meters, Nyx squeaked, coughing in the smoke. "Signal is weak." "Closer," Elias said. The heat from the walkers' cannons was palpable now. They were firing rhythmic suppression patterns. Boom! A shell hit the deck of the bridge 50 feet to their right. The shockwave knocked Elias down. His ears rang. He scrambled up, dragging Nyx with him. "Now. Do it now." Nyx scrambled to his knees, his fingers flying across his datapad. Bypassing firewall, injecting logic loop. "Come on, come on." The smoke swirled. Above them, the massive metal leg of a walker loomed out of the darkness like a skyscraper. The turret swiveled down. The blue light of the cannon cut through the gloom, illuminating them. "They see us." Kale roared, leaping in front of Elias with a piece of scrap metal as a shield. The cannon whined, charging. "Nyx!" Elias screamed. "Got it." Nyx hit enter. Click. The blue light on the cannon died. The walker froze mid-step. Its engine note dropped from a roar to a confused idle. Targeting sensors offline. Nyx cheered. "They are blind." "Charge." Elias bellowed. The Legion burst from the smoke. The riot troopers behind the barricades were terrified. They had been expecting targets to pop up at a distance. Instead, an army of screaming ghosts emerged from the fog right on top of them. For the vanguard, Jack screamed, firing his shock rifle. The battle was chaotic. The rebels swarmed the barricades. Grom smashed a trooper through a railing and into the abyss below. Kale moved like a blur, a whirlwind of claws and fury. But the prize was the walkers. Scale them, Elias ordered. The rebels used grappling hooks and magnetic clamps. They swarmed up the legs of the paralyzed machines. Elias climbed the center walker. He reached the cockpit hatch. He didn't have a code. He used a shaped charge of mining explosives. Bang! The hatch blew inward. Elias dropped a stun grenade inside and jumped in after it. 2 seconds later, the pilot came flying out of the hatch. Elias sat in the pilot's chair. He overrode the lockout. "This is Elias," he said over the massive external speakers of the walker. "The bridge is ours." He swiveled the massive guns around, aiming them at the inner city gates. "Open the door." The gates of the inner city did not open. They were blown off their hinges by the captured walkers. Elias led the army through the smoke and ruin. They stepped into a different world. The Shadow District was gray and black. The White City was pristine. The streets were paved with polished marble. The buildings were sculpted from white stone and gold. Fountains sprayed crystal-clear water into the air. Manicured gardens bloomed with flowers imported from a dozen worlds. It was silent. The wealthy citizens, the highborn, the merchants, the politicians, had barricaded themselves in their mansions. The streets were empty. The rebel army slowed down. They looked around in awe, and then in anger. "Look at this," a ragged miner spat, pointing at a fountain. "We drink recycled sewage water, and they spray fresh water on the ground for decoration." He raised his heavy wrench. "Smash it. Smash it all." "Burn it down," another shouted. "Take their gold. Take their food." A group of rebels broke off, heading toward an opulent villa. They kicked in the door. Screams echoed from inside. "No," Elias said. He didn't shout. He simply activated the jump jets on the stolen Praetorian armor he now wore. He launched himself into the air, landing with a heavy thud in front of the villa door. The rebel stopped, surprised. "Get out of the way, Saint," the miner growled. "They took everything from us. We're taking it back." "We are here for the Archon," Elias said, his voice hard as iron. "We are here for the system. We are not here to loot houses." "They are the enemy," the miner shouted. "They are civilians." Elias roared back. He grabbed the miner by his collar and shoved him back. "Listen to me." Elias addressed the entire mob. "If you burn this city, if you slaughter families in their homes, then you are no better than Xylar. You are just a different kind of monster." "We want justice," a woman screamed. "This isn't justice." Elias gestured to the terrified family cowering inside the villa. "This is revenge. Justice is hard. Revenge is easy. Are you weak? Or are you strong?" The crowd wavered. They were angry, but they respected him. "Kale," Elias called out. The massive Togarian stepped up. "Post guards at every residential block," Elias ordered. "If anyone loots, if anyone harms a non-combatant, you answer to me." Kale nodded. He looked at the mob. "You heard the commander. Form up. Eyes forward. We march on the Spire." The tension broke. The mob lowered their weapons. The miner looked at the fountain, then at Elias. He nodded slowly, spitting on the ground, and fell back into line. They marched through the White City. Inside the mansions, the elite watched from behind curtains. They expected fire. They expected rape and murder. Instead, they saw an army of slaves marching in perfect discipline. They saw the barbarians sharing their water canteens. They saw the Iron Legion moving with a dignity that the Imperial Guard had lost long ago. Elias walked at the front. He kept his eyes on the diamond spire looming in the distance. It was the tallest structure on the planet, a needle of glass piercing the sky. "Commander," Jack said, walking beside him. "That was close." "The war is the easy part, Jax," Elias said quietly. "Keeping your soul, that's the fight." A hologram flickered to life in the center of the main avenue. It was huge, projecting the face of High Archon Xylar directly into their path. "Thorne," Xylar's voice boomed. He looked disheveled, his eyes wild. "You have defiled my city." Elias stopped. The army halted behind him. "I have liberated your city, Xylar," Elias said to the projection. The image shifted. It showed the throne room at the top of the spire. Xylar was standing behind a kneeling figure. It was Valeriana. She was bound in energy cuffs, an executioner's blade hovering millimeters from her neck. "You think you have won?" Xylar sneered. "Come to the spire, Thorne. Alone. If anyone else enters the building, she dies." A collective gasp went through the rebel ranks. "It's a trap," Kale growled. "Of course it's a trap," Elias said, staring at Valeriana's terrified face. "You have 1 hour," Xylar said. "Let us see if the saint is willing to bleed for his sins." The hologram faded. Elias stood in silence for a moment. He checked the charge on his railgun. He checked the grenades on his belt. He turned to Kale. "Surround the building," Elias ordered. "Secure the perimeter. But no one comes in." "You can't beat him alone," Kale said. "He has progenitor armor. Ancient tech." Elias looked at the spire. "I don't have to beat him, Kale," Elias said, a grim smile touching his lips. "I just have to bring the house down." He began to walk toward the spire. Alone. The lobby of the Diamond Spire was a cathedral of silence. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting the high vaulted ceiling that seemed to disappear into a haze of golden light. Elias walked in alone. The heavy blast doors hissed shut behind him, sealing him in. He was breathing hard. The march through the city, the battle on the bridge, the weeks of torture in the cells, it was all catching up to him. His body was a wreck. His stolen armor was cracked, his left eye was swollen shut, and his ribs felt like a bag of broken glass. "Welcome, guest," the building's AI chimed pleasantly. "The High Archon is expecting you in the penthouse." The great lift waited at the far end of the hall. It was a glass tube that ran up the exterior of the building, offering a view of the city below. Elias stepped inside. "Penthouse," he said. The lift accelerated. The ground fell away. As he rose, Elias looked out at the Capitol. He saw the smoke rising from the Shadow District. He saw the Bridge of Tears littered with the wreckage of the walkers. He saw the ring of rebel soldiers surrounding the base of the spire, a circle of iron protecting him from below. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Xylar's voice came over the lift's intercom. It was crisp, devoid of the static that usually accompany comms. "It's burning, Xylar," Elias said, staring at the fires. "Fire cleanses," Xylar replied. "You think you are saving them, Thorne? You are unleashing chaos. Look at them. They are looting. They are fighting. Without a strong hand, they will eat each other." "They are free," Elias said. "Freedom is messy, but it's better than a cage." "Is it?" Xylar mused. "I gave them purpose. I gave them order. I gave them peace." "You gave them a boot on their neck," Elias said. He checked the grenades on his belt. He had 6 high-explosive charges left. Not enough to level the building, but enough to hurt it. "And you?" Xylar asked. "What will you give them? You are a soldier. You know how to destroy, but do you know how to build?" "That's not my job," Elias said. "My job is to take out the trash so the builders can work." The lift slowed. They were passing the cloud layer. The city below vanished, replaced by a sea of white vapor. "You are coming to your death, Elias," Xylar whispered. "I possess the progenitor armor. It is older than your species. It is invincible." "Nothing is invincible," Elias muttered, unclipping a grenade and holding it in his palm. "Just durable." The lift chimed. Penthouse level. The doors slid open. Elias stepped out into a long hallway lined with statues of past Archons. They stared down at him with stone eyes. He walked past them, his boots echoing on the marble. He felt the weight of history here, the weight of 1,000 years of tyranny. He reached the massive golden doors of the throne room. He paused. He took a breath, centering himself. He thought of Miller, Vance, and the Vanguard. He thought of the slaves in the mines. He thought of Valeriana. "End of a line," Elias whispered. He pushed the doors open. The throne room was not just a room. It was a testament to absolute power. The walls were transparent aluminum, offering a 360-degree view of the sky. The floor was white marble, veined with gold. At the center, raised on a dais of floating graph plates, sat the dragon's throne. and floating above it was Xylar. He was terrifying. The progenitor armor was a sleek, biomechanical suit of black and gold that seemed to pulse with living energy. It added a foot to his height. Energy wings, formed of hard light, extended from his back. He held a double-bladed energy staff that hummed with a violent violet light. At the foot of the dais, Valeriana knelt. She was bound in energy shackles, her face bruised, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Elias, run," she screamed. "You can't hurt him." Xylar flicked a finger. A bolt of force hit Valeriana, knocking the wind out of her. "Silence, traitor," Xylar hissed. He turned to Elias. The faceplate of his helmet was translucent, showing his golden eyes wide with madness. "You look small, human," Xylar said. "Where is your legion? Where is your crowd?" Elias walked to the center of the room. He stopped 20 paces away. He dropped his rifle. It clattered loudly on the floor. "I don't need a crowd to look you in the eye," Elias said. "Arrogance," Xylar sneered. "You think because you defeated my guards, you can defeat me?" This armor was forged in the heart of a dying star. It channels the energy of the Spire itself. "I am a god in this room." "A god dependent on a battery," Elias noted, glancing at the glowing energy conduits running up the walls behind the throne. "Enough talk," Xylar raised his staff. "Kneel, and I will make your death quick. Refuse, and I will peel the skin from your bones while she watches." Elias looked at Valeriana. He gave her a micro-nod. "Close your eyes." "I don't kneel," Elias said. Xylar roared and charged. He moved faster than the eye could follow. A streak of gold and violet. Elias acted on pure instinct. He rolled forward, diving under the swing of the staff. The energy blade sliced through the air where his head had been a split second before. The heat of it singed his ears. Elias came up swinging his short sword. He struck Xylar's back. Clang! The blade shattered. It didn't even scratch the paint. Xylar spun around and backhanded Elias with a gauntlet fist. The impact was like being hit by a car. Elias flew across the room, smashing into a marble pillar. The stone cracked. Elias crumpled to the floor, spitting blood. "Pathetic," Xylar laughed, hovering towards him. "Is that the best the vanguard has to offer?" Elias groaned, struggling to his knees. His vision was blurry. His ribs were definitely broken now. "Just testing the armor," Elias wheezed. Xylar landed. He grabbed Elias by the throat and lifted him into the air with one hand. The grip was crushing. "You are nothing," Xylar spat, his face inches from Elias. "You are dirt. You should have died in the mines." Elias's feet dangled. He clawed at the armored hand, but it was immovable. He felt his consciousness slipping. "Maybe," Elias gasped. "But I learned a few things in the dirt." Elias reached to his belt. He didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a flashbang grenade. He didn't throw it. He pulled the pin and held it right in front of Xylar's translucent faceplate. "Lights out," Elias whispered. Bang! The grenade detonated at point-blank range. The sound was deafening in the enclosed helmet. The flash was blinding. The optical sensors of the progenitor armor overloaded instantly. Xylar shrieked, dropping Elias as he clawed at his own helmet, blinded and deafened. Elias hit the floor and rolled. He didn't attack Xylar. He sprinted toward the throne. "My eyes! I cannot see!" Xylar screamed, flailing his staff wildly. He fired random bolts of energy, shattering the windows. Elias reached the dais. He saw the main power conduit, a thick column of pulsating blue light that ran from the floor to the ceiling, feeding the armor its infinite power. He unclipped his belt. All 5 remaining high-explosive grenades were attached to it. He punched the timer. 5 seconds. He jammed the belt into the machinery at the base of the conduit. "Valeriana, get down!" Elias screamed. He turned and sprinted back toward her, diving to cover her body with his own. Xylar's sensors rebooted. He saw Elias. He saw the grenade belt in the conduit. "No!" Xylar screamed, flying toward the throne. "My power!" Kaboom! The explosion was contained, but catastrophic. The shaped charges severed the magnetic containment field of the conduit. The energy of the Spire, enough to power a city, had nowhere to go. It arced outward. A beam of raw, uncontrolled plasma shot up through the ceiling, slicing the top of the diamond spire in half. The feedback loop hit Xylar. His armor, connected to the grid, overloaded. Arcs of blue lightning danced over his suit. He screamed as the suit locked up, the servos seizing. The anti-gravity systems failed. Xylar dropped from the air like a stone. He crashed onto the marble floor, the weight of the massive suit pinning him down. The room began to tilt. The explosion had compromised the structural integrity of the penthouse. The floor was cracking. The building is coming down. Valeriana cried, coughing in the dust. Elias pulled her to her feet. He used a piece of debris to smash her cuffs. "We have to go. Now." Elias yelled over the groaning of the metal. They ran toward the elevator. But the shaft was twisted, the car gone. The window. Elias pointed. The glass wall had been shattered by the blast. The wind was howling into the room. "We can't jump." Valeriana shouted, looking at the drop. "It's a mile down. Trust me." Elias grabbed her hand. Behind them, Xylar was struggling to move. His suit was dead weight. He crawled, dragging himself with his fingertips. "Help me," Xylar shrieked. "Thorne, you cannot leave me. I am the Archon." Elias stopped. He looked back at the man who had destroyed his life, the man who had killed his friends. The ceiling above the throne groaned and began to crumble. Massive chunks of debris were falling. "You wanted to be a part of history, Xylar," Elias said, his voice cold. He turned his back. "Now you are." A massive slab of the ceiling fell, burying the throne and the Archon beneath it. Elias turned to the open window. He pulled Valeriana close. "Jump." They leaped into the void. For a second, there was only the wind and the fall. Then a roar. A dropship, stolen by Kale and the Legion, surged up from the cloud layer. The side door was open. Kale was leaning out, secured by a harness, his massive paw extended. "Gotcha." Kale roared. He caught Elias's arm. The momentum slammed them against the hull, but Kale didn't let go. He hauled them both inside. Elias collapsed onto the deck, gasping for air. He held onto Valeriana. They crawled to the viewport. They watched as the top 50 floors of the diamond spire sheared off. The massive needle of glass and gold tilted, slid, and then fell. It tumbled in slow motion, crashing into the plaza below in a cloud of dust that looked like an atomic mushroom cloud. The symbol of the Empire was gone. Silence filled the dropship. "It is done," Kale whispered. Elias looked at Valeriana. She was watching the ruins of her family's legacy. She reached out and took Elias's hand. "No," Elias said, looking at the sun breaking through the clouds. "It's just beginning." The crash of the diamond spire was felt before it was heard. A tremor, deep and resonant, traveled through the bedrock of the planet, shaking the dust from the rafters of the lowest mines in Omega. Then came the cloud, a billowing wall of white dust, pulverized glass, and gold leaf that rolled over the central plaza like a fog bank. The dropship touched down in the center of the haze. The engines whined down and died. Inside, Elias unbuckled his harness. He looked at Valeriana. She was staring at the ramp door, her hands trembling. She wasn't trembling from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. The world she knew was gone. "Are you ready?" Elias asked gently. She took a deep breath, smoothing her torn robes. She lifted her chin. "I have to be." The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. Elias walked out first. The air was thick with dust, coating his armor in a ghostly white layer. He limped slightly, the adrenaline fading, revealing the agony of his injuries. He stopped at the bottom of the ramp. Surrounding the plaza, emerging from the white mist, were thousands of figures. On one side stood the Imperial Guard, led by General Krell. They were fully armed, their armor gleaming dully in the diffused light. On the other side stood the army of the liberated, miners, gladiators, and citizens. They were ragged, bloodied, and holding their weapons with white-knuckled grips. The two armies stared at each other over the wreckage of the spire. The silence was absolute. One wrong move, one nervous finger on a trigger, and the plaza would become a slaughterhouse. Elias raised his hand. It was a command to his own people, but the guards watched him too. He turned back to the ship and offered his hand to Valeriana. She stepped out. She looked small against the backdrop of the ruined tower, but she walked with the grace of a queen. She stepped down the ramp and stood beside Elias. General Krell stepped forward. The old soldier looked at the rubble where his Archon lay buried. He looked at the woman standing beside the gladiator. Krell slowly holstered his pistol. He reached up and unclasped his helmet. He pulled it off and tucked it under his arm. "The Archon is dead," Krell announced. His voice was gruff, carrying across the silent plaza. He looked at Valeriana. "The king is dead," Krell repeated. He went down on one knee. "Long live the Chancellor." It was the signal. Behind him, the captains of the Imperial Guard knelt. Then the lieutenants. Then the troopers. A wave of white armor bowing down. On the other side of the plaza, the rebels lowered their weapons. They didn't bow. They cheered. It started as a murmur and grew into a roar. Caps were thrown in the air. Strangers hugged each other. The sound washed over Elias, warm and loud. "The Iron Saint! The Iron Saint!" Elias watched them. He felt a hand on his arm. Valeriana was looking at him, tears in her eyes. "They are cheering for you, Elias," she said. "No," Elias shook his head, looking at the diverse crowd. Orcs, humans, Solarians, all standing together. "They are cheering for themselves. I just gave them the excuse." Kale and the Legion pushed through the crowd to join them. The Togarian was covered in soot, his axe chipped, but he was grinning. "We did it, little brother," Kale roared, slapping Elias on the back hard enough to make him stagger. "The wolf is dead. And the pack survives," Elias smiled painfully. Jax ran up, breathless, his face smeared with grease. "Elias, did you see the spire? It fell just like you said. It was... The boy couldn't find the words. He just grabbed Elias in a hug. Elias returned the embrace, holding the kid tight. He looked over Jax's shoulder at the rising sun cutting through the dust cloud. The war was over. The fighting was done. But as Elias looked at the kneeling generals and the cheering mob, he knew the hardest part was just beginning. Building a world was much harder than breaking one. 3 weeks later, the Senate Hall had been scrubbed clean. The banners of the Archon, the black dragon on gold, were gone. In their place hung simple tapestries of white and blue, the colors of the new republic. Elias stood on the balcony of the Chancellor's office. He wore a simple gray uniform, devoid of medals or rank. His arm was in a sling, and he moved with a stiffness that would likely never leave him. But he was healed. The door opened. Valeriana walked in. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes, but her spirit was bright. "The council is arguing about grain tariffs," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Sometimes I think fighting Xylar was easier." "Politics is just war without the honesty," Elias said, turning to face her. She smiled, walking over to stand beside him. She looked out at the city. Construction drones were already rebuilding the damage. The slave pens were being converted into housing. "The council voted this morning," Valeriana said softly. "They want to appoint a supreme commander of the Coalition Defense Forces." She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "They want you, Elias. Unanimously. Even Krell voted for you." Elias looked at her. He saw the hope in her eyes. He saw the future they could have, power, influence, a legacy written in the stars. He took a deep breath. "I can't, Val." "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "You are the hero. They listen to you. We could build this new world together." "Because a hero is just a gladiator with a better title," Elias said gently. "And I am done fighting." He looked down at his hands. Hands that had held rifles, swords, and the lives of men. "I have been a soldier for 20 years. Then a slave. Then a symbol. I have spent my entire life defined by war. If I stay here, I will always be the man who pulled down the spire. And you don't need that man anymore. You need builders. You need peace." "And where will you go?" she asked, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Home," Elias said. "Earth." "Earth is a ruin," she said. "It was," Elias nodded. "But I hear the grass is growing back. I need to see it. I need to see if there is anything left of the man I was before the drop at Ethelgard." Valeriana nodded slowly. She understood. He was a man who had given everything he had. He had emptied the well. "Will you return?" she whispered. Elias looked at her. He thought of the nights in the medical wing. The spark in the dark. "Someday," Elias said. When the swords are beaten into plowshares. When you don't need a commander anymore, maybe you'll need a friend. He bowed his head, a gesture of respect between equals. Strength and honor, Chancellor. She reached out, touching his face one last time. Strength and honor, Elias. The hangar bay. The small, unmarked courier ship sat ready on the pad. Steam vented from its engines. The Legion was there to see him off. Kale stood tall, wearing the golden armor of the captain of the Senate Guard. The badge of the Republic gleamed on his chest. He enveloped Elias in a bone-crushing hug. "You leave us, little brother," Kale grumbled into Elias's ear. "Who will keep me out of trouble?" "You have a city to protect now, Kale," Elias smiled, patting the giant's back. "Try not to break too many walls." "I make no promises," Kale grinned, baring his fangs. Nix scurried up, holding a datapad. "I updated the NAV computer for you, boss. Shortest route to the Sol sector. And I put a few thousand credits in the ship's account. From the Royal Treasury." "You hacked the Treasury?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "I merely reallocated some funds from the former Archon's retirement plan." Nix winked. Elias laughed. He turned to Jax. The boy had grown. He stood straight, his shoulders back. He was wearing the uniform of a cadet in the newly formed academy. "You okay, kid?" Elias asked. "I'm good, Elias," Jax said. He held out his hand. "Thank you. For everything." Elias took the hand. He pulled Jax in for a hug. "You're the future, Jax. Be better than us. Build something that lasts." "I will," Jax promised. Elias walked up the ramp. He stopped at the top and looked back. 12 warriors. Different species. Different worlds. United by the sand and the blood. They were the best family he had ever known. He didn't say goodbye. The Iron Legion didn't say goodbye. He raised his fist in the air. In unison, the 12 warriors raised theirs. Strength and honor. The airlock hissed shut. Earth. The journey took 3 weeks. Elias spent the time sleeping, really sleeping, for the first time in years. When the ship dropped out of hyperspace, the sight took his breath away. Earth hung in the void. It was scarred, yes. He could see the gray craters where the megacities used to be. He could see the atmospheric scrubbers working overtime in the stratosphere. But he saw blue. He saw white clouds. And he saw green. He landed the ship on a grassy hill overlooking the ruins of the old Coalition headquarters. It was evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. Elias walked out of the ship. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just simple clothes. The wind blew through the tall grass. It smelled of pine needles, rain, and wet earth. It smelled of life. He walked to the edge of the hill. He knelt down and scooped up a handful of dirt. It was cool and damp. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small data chip Valeriana had given him, the chip that had saved the revolution. He dug a small hole in the earth and placed the chip inside. He buried the war. He stood up and looked at the horizon. In the valley below, he saw lights flickering on. A small settlement. He saw smoke rising from chimneys. He heard the distant sound of a dog barking. It wasn't a grand empire. It wasn't a golden spire. It was home. Elias Thorne took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the air of a free world. The ghost of the vanguard was gone. The gladiator was gone. The man remained. He smiled a genuine, peaceful smile and began the walk down the hill. The end.